So Alexander technique could be described as a kind of mindfulness in the whole body, an embodied mindfulness of the whole body. It's also a way of learning to recognize what we're choosing. So essentially how we're choosing to be in our body, and mostly those are unconscious things.
Hmm.
So it's developing a sense of what is it that I'm choosing, whether I intend to or not, whether I realize it or not, and developing a greater ability to be able to choose how you want to be in yourself, in your body. It's a practice of using our observation of ourself, the idea that we can choose to not do something. This is sometimes called non-doing, and the idea of using our intention. So for example, proposing something to ourselves and going in that direction.
Today, my special guest is Mari Hodges. Mari Hodges is passionate about helping people acquire the skills for living life fully with integrity and increased personal agency. Chronic neck and back pain led Mari to Alexander Technique and inspired her curiosity about pain science. In her private practice in Montana, Mari teaches Alexander Technique and provides pain management and recovery coaching. She also teaches courses on pain science for people living with pain, and she also teaches course on pain science for somatic practitioners. She founded and runs the PainSavvy Walk Talk volunteer community program supporting prevention and recovery from chronic pain. Mari obtained her Alexander Technique teaching certification from the Escuela de Técnica Alexander, Buenos Aires. She holds a Master of Science in Medicine in Pain Management from the University of Sydney and a Therapeutic Pain Specialist certification from Purdue University. She's also certified as an Art of Running instructor. In her free time, you can find Mari reading up on pain science, dancing tango, and training for her new passion, which is surfing. You can find more about Mari and Alexander Technique at www.discoverease.how. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Mari. Hi, Mari. It's so great to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Christina. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, so you have a wealth of information on a whole bunch of things from somatic techniques, pain, a lot of different things. And I understand that you specialize in Alexander technique, which is really interesting. I don't have a ton of experience with that. So for people who have not even maybe even heard of Alexander technique before, how would you describe that in sort of easy to understand terms?
Okay, yeah. So Alexander technique could be described as a kind of mindfulness in the whole body, an embodied mindfulness of the whole body. It's also a way of learning to recognize what we're choosing. So essentially how we're choosing to be in our body, and mostly those are unconscious things.
Hmm.
So it's developing a sense of what is it that I'm choosing, whether I intend to or not, whether I realize it or not, and developing a greater ability to be able to choose how you want to be in yourself, in your body. It's a practice of using our observation of ourself, the idea that we can choose to not do something. This is sometimes called non-doing, and the idea of using our intention. So for example, proposing something to ourselves and going in that direction. And that can sound a little abstract. So as we get into a guided practice later, that might be a little bit more clear. But another part of that on the physical level is developing muscle tone that's just enough, not too much, not too little. So for example, if I don't have enough muscle tone, I might feel kind of collapsed and heavy and stuck. Or if I have too much muscle tone, I might feel stuck and stiff and tense. So it's finding that Goldilocks zone, kind of a
Hmm.
sweet spot of distributing the work throughout yourself in a way that helps you to be comfortable and that helps you to be stable and mobile. So those are kind of the three things that it's helping us to do: be comfortable in our body and have mobility of our body, of our thoughts, of our emotions, and also stability.
It sounds pretty magical to me. Is it like when we think about somatics, I kind of think, I mean, I think about a range of expressions from big dance movement therapy type stuff, and then trying to get in touch with our internal organs, the experiential anatomy and that sort of thing. Alexander technique, where does it lie on the spectrum as far as like the scale of movement that we work with in Alexander technique, or maybe there's multiple, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, there are those schematics that show all the different types of somatic modalities and all their relationships. All of them are quite interrelated. And
Yeah.
Alexander would be on the end of the spectrum that's more conscious thinking, using our attention. It can involve movement, but it doesn't have to. So it can be useful for people who are not able to move, for example, for whatever reason, or who prefer not to. So it's a way of using our thoughts and our attention to change what happens in our muscle activation and the things that we do and the way that we do them. So it's more, yeah, I'd say it's more on the not so much movement, more
Yeah.
reasoning out and thinking side.
Mhm.
Not that others don't involve that as well, and it
Right.
does involve movement too. Um, I don't know if that answered your question very well.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a little bit more on like this subtle sort of movement side. It's maybe a little bit
That's a,
smaller
it can
movement.
involve a lot of really subtle movement of joints. We can look at, for example, the really subtle and delicate movements of our head spine joint, the occipital joint, way up there at the top of our spine, how our head
Mhm.
is free to balance and move when we allow it to balance, letting go of neck muscle tension, for example. So we can zoom into, to delve into sort of more subtle areas, and we can also zoom out. And
Mhm.
the idea is to see ourselves as a whole and to see how is the whole functioning as a
Mhm.
whole, as
Mhm.
opposed to body parts. And that's quite similar to other somatic
Mhm.
approaches too.
Is it tuning into the subtle qualities of the body as a whole, and then also paying attention to emotions and thoughts, or is it more focused on the physical sensations?
I'd say the focus on the physical sensations is often the way in. So, for example, it can be about how do I sit to be stable and comfortable and mobile, but that is also about life. How do I walk?
Mm.
How do I walk in a comfortable way where I'm balanced, I'm not going to fall, and I can move freely? How am I walking through life? It can begin as a physical practice, but often people go beyond that to look at their own life choices and be able to apply it to life in general.
Mhm. That's
I,
fascinating.
I think it's about life, really, not just about our body.
Okay. So it's making me think of really making me think about posture and gesture and kind of like even some of the research that there's been on like power poses and stuff. Like if when we are literally changing our body, that has a resultant impact on our physiology and the way that we're actually perceiving things. So if I'm sitting here moving through life, crunched over and have this posture of like, you know, passive or depression or something, then that has a impact on how I might be feeling as I go through life. But if I'm sitting up straight, I have my spine straight, I'm looking at people in the eye, maybe I'm smiling, that this has an impact on how I move through the world. I feel like I'm being really simplistic here, but is this kind of what it's about? Experimenting with your different body and see how that helps you in interacting with the world.
Yeah, they're definitely related. The emotional aspect and the postural aspect, the muscle tone aspect, they're definitely related. It could go back and forth, and like you said, it can affect our perception. And Alexander technique, it is often assumed to be about posture, where it's actually about getting rid of posture. It's about helping us to let go of posturing.
Hmm.
So we posture in so many ways in life, no? Like you mentioned, scrunching ourselves up,
Hmm.
tightening, and we can scrunch ourselves up in so many ways. And maybe being out there, to meet conflict, to defend ourselves in some way, or going inward. And for sure, all of these things are very much tied with our thoughts and our emotions. It's inseparable, really. And so what we're not looking to correct posture in any way, because everyone's posture is unique. It's unique to the circumstances and the feelings and the thoughts. The important thing is that we can move in and out of them. If I find, for example, I have a habitual posture of kind of being there,
Right.
kind of maybe collapsed down or pulled in, that's perfectly fine. It may have some qualities to it that I don't like, no? Like maybe it's hard to move from here. Maybe after a while it's not really comfortable. Maybe it's hard to even think here. So I can go there. Maybe I could go all the way there, go back in my chair and really let myself be there. But I want to be able to move out of it, so, and not get stuck in it. So that's one way I like to look at it, is that whatever habitual postures we have, those are perfectly fine. You know, we don't want to correct them or judge them. And we want to add more. We want to have more options that we can be able to move through, to be able to adapt to our world and to our circumstances.
Interesting. This is reminding me of sensory regulation and sort of nervous system regulation, that it's not like that we have to have a certain state of arousal all the time. Like we don't have to be on, or we don't have to be calm, or it's like we don't have to be a certain way, but having the ability to modulate, to have fluidity, to have agency in adjusting our state based
Like
upon what we desire, related to whatever circumstance we're in. We might need to adjust, and having that ability, that's kind of what it's for, what that's reminding me about what you're describing.
I like how you described that. And in the Alexander technique, we might use particularly information from our physical senses to give us information about that. So am I holding myself with tension? What if I let that go? Can I move more easily?
Seems like such a valuable exploration. Also difficult. I don't want to discount that. Like I think that this subtle attunement to your body and be able to develop this flexibility, these skills, really, I think this could be a real challenge for a lot of people, especially people who've been so disconnected from their body, people recovering from addictive patterns, people recovering from eating disorders. A lot of times they're disconnected from their body. I wonder if you have like sort of just maybe like a Alexander Technique 101, or if someone were to come to the first class, what could be a way that someone could begin to sense or feel their subtle whole body patterns if they've been disconnected for what seems like eternity?
In an in-person Alexander lesson, we'll often use hands-on contact. And what that does is it helps both of us to learn more about what's going on in the body. So for example, I may place hands on a shoulder to bring attention and awareness to what's going on in there. So for example, if I have a lot of tension in my shoulders, a hand resting there that's not manipulative, it's not trying to move it in any way, it's not trying to make it go down or back or forward or anything, just resting there, being a presence that brings awareness there, where the individual can discover, I'm doing something that I don't need and I can let that go. And that leads to a release. And so that can be very illuminating for people to discover that they can let go of tensions that they've been holding on to. And often we don't even notice them until we let go of them. So that moment of release is that moment of discovery. Oh, I've been doing that to myself, and what a relief. And people often feel a sense of relief. So it can, the contact can be helpful. Some gentle movement can be helpful, and also proposals to do something, and then we see what happens. So for example, I might ask someone to, I'll just go with something really simple. I might ask, if we're sitting, I might ask them, would you please stand up? And then we'll see, how do they do that? And how do they react to that request? In what way are they using their body that gets in the way of getting up or choosing something different? And what else can they choose to allow their body to move more fluidly, more easily, to maybe decide not to get up, to maybe decide to do something different
Mm,
in that in a moment of pause before the activity. So we begin to introduce a pause before acting, before
mm,
responding to a stimulus, which in that case was me asking the person to do something.
mhm.
And in the pause, we can discover things that we're doing. We can see when we allow a pause. Now, in life, we just generally jump to things,
Right.
and it's hard to see what's going on. It all happens so fast. So, with a pause before acting, before responding to a stimulus, that gives us an opportunity to choose and allow a different response to happen that might not have occurred to us, even.
I think that sounds, I mean, that sounds incredibly powerful, especially in the context of people recovering from, compulsive food patterns, binge eating, because it's so often just this immediate sort of autopilot, this immediate action. It sounds like in Alexander Technique, there's an offering of support in developing the pause, supporting someone in developing the agency to make a different choice. And all of this is like literally like physically, like physically pause before you stand up or take a seat or do whatever the person might be, the facilitator might be asking of the person. And yeah, helping them to develop agency and skill in navigating their body and how they might regulate themselves. And I'm just fascinated by how this can impact someone's ability to navigate psychologically sort of things, how this physical act of pausing can translate into them, the next time that maybe they go to the kitchen and they open up the cupboard and they remembered that their body has paused before. They were just working with you and they just experienced that pause in their body and they can remember the pause. Whereas, sometimes, for example, talk therapies, it's just talking about things, but they don't have it imprinted in on that somatic level. And so I think that that's really compelling in Alexander Technique that you're like working with them on actually experimenting with this in physical ways that has, real impact in, as you were saying, in life.
I think we can use the pause in different ways too. For example, if we say, oh, okay, I'm supposed to pause, and we stop and we count to 10, we're perhaps not getting much benefit out of a pause. Maybe we're tensing ourselves up even more, fighting some kind of impulse, which is
Hmm.
not productive and in the long term, not sustainable either. So, in that pause, what can we discover about it that's actually enjoyable too? And get that information that we might not otherwise get by paying attention. And we could use our attention in lots of different ways in that pause, but it's so rich in that there's a lot of good stuff in that pause too that we can enjoy. We can enjoy some rest. We can enjoy our breath. We can enjoy some freedom of movement of our body. We can enjoy the possibility of just saying no and know that we have that agency, like you mentioned, and that can feel good. And I believe that that reinforces our desire to do the pause the next time.
I love that. I love that. When I was thinking about this pause, honestly, my mind was just thinking like, someone like you, Mari, supporting someone in kind of like managing the pause, the suffering of the pause, like dealing with the discomfort of the pause. But I love that you brought up the fact of like there actually can be a lot of joy that we can find in the pause
Right.
if we pay attention to all the reasons that you said, like, maybe I can relax my body, maybe I can take a breath, maybe I can feel good that I had the confidence to take my next best step now that I'm pausing. All these benefits that you talked about the pause when my mind was just going like, oh, helping someone move through the discomfort. But you're right that there's actually so much, there's many benefits and there could be some relief and satisfaction and pleasure even in that pause. And I
Pleasure.
love that you are reminding me and potentially the people you work with of that too.
And in the pause, we can shift our attention. So when there's an impulse to do something, often our attention is focused outside of ourselves. And so we often lose our internal balance because
Mm-hmm.
of that intense focus on something.
Right.
And in that pause, we can bring our attention back to ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
recover our balance, come back to ourselves, come back to our own support, our
Mm-hmm.
own inner support. And from there, we might decide to do something different. And we might decide to do the same thing that we were about to do, but with a different experience. And that changes everything.
So it's about being able to navigate our bodies, having fluidity in our nervous systems. It's about being able to pause, and in that pause, then we can reevaluate and, be able to
Reassess. Yeah.
reassess. Yeah, am I following so far?
Yeah, yeah. And then we can even begin to choose different ways of being in our body more easily.
And that's part of the experimentation of the way that we walk, of shedding
Yeah.
like shedding normal patterns and shells, like that sort of experimenting with different ways of being.
Yeah, that's part of it too, developing a greater repertoire of options that we can choose from also. If they don't exist, we can't choose it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And also, if we don't know what we're doing, we don't know where to go from there either. So it's first about discovering what are we doing,
Mm-hmm.
going on, that I'm not aware that I'm choosing.
I'd love if possible to just give us a tiny little taste of this, if you would be willing to guide us through a short experience so that we can get a sense of Alexander technique just a little bit.
Sure,
Bit.
sure. So, what I'll propose first is that everyone who is watching or listening can be in whatever position they'd like to be in. They could be sitting, they could be standing, they could be lying down, they could be walking, so
Oh,
that
I love
everyone,
that.
yeah, everyone can first choose how they want to be as they're listening. And I'm going to speak from sitting just because I'm sitting right now, but if
Okay.
anyone's in a different position, they can just apply it to how they're being. So I like to start everything by stopping.
Ooh, okay.
And all my students in my group classes are, are really familiar with that now. And they love starting by stopping because we pause to let go of what we might be carrying around with us to allow ourselves to be able to do something different. So I'll talk through this letting go of maybe things that we don't need, discovering them. So as we're sitting on the chair, just giving some attention to feet on the ground and noticing the contact that the feet have with the ground and noticing the contact that your bottom has with the chair. And giving attention to the support underneath the feet, the support underneath your bottom. And trusting in that support to let the weight of your feet release down into the ground, to let the weight of your body release down into the chair, through the chair, down into the ground. Trusting that the chair will hold you up and that the ground can receive your weight. And then we can observe, does anything change as I let my weight down? As I give my attention to the support underneath me, does anything change in me? And we can include our hands. Hands are often doing so much all day long, working so hard. So right now we could give our hands also a chance to rest, maybe on your legs, letting them stop doing. They're free to do nothing right now. Free to rest, letting the weight of hands release down into legs, and they're being supported by the legs. And as we let hands rest there, being supported, again, observing what changes as I let my hands rest. And we can begin to include in our awareness our breath with no intentions of changing it in any way, just watching it. Watching it flow in and out. Just noticing if there's a tendency to hold it at any point. And if so, just again allowing it to flow on, to flow out and to flow in. And we could observe the motion of our ribs also, rising out in every direction and releasing back and down again. And we don't have to do anything about it. Trusting the breath to do itself. We don't have to take in air. We don't have to push the air out. And no need to hold it. We could experiment for a moment with holding breath for just a couple seconds. And notice what happens in your body. What happens in the musculature of the torso and maybe other parts of the body too. They have to grip for us to hold our breath. So not holding breath, just allowing it to flow in and out. We could notice the things around us also, the space around us, including the space in front of us and behind and above, around. And we could think of allowing our shoulders to release out to the sides, out into that space. Releasing out so that we can widen, not squeezing ourselves. And we could experiment with giving ourselves a little squeeze, like squeezing a sponge, and then letting it go, and just notice how you release back out like a sponge. And then without squeezing ourselves, we can just come back to that thought of allowing ourselves to release out, to expand, to be like an expanding sponge. And we can include in our awareness our eyes also. Our eyes are often doing a lot all day long, and the muscles around our eyes are often doing a lot. Maybe straining to see or to look. So not looking at anything in particular, just seeing what you see, and allowing the muscles around your eyes to soften. No need to look at anything in particular, just seeing stuff. And as you look around, letting your eyes roam around, and notice as your eyes move, your face wants to follow, and just letting your face follow where your eyes go, so that your head can turn easily at the top of your spine. So that we don't have to effort turning our head. Our head can glide. We can look upwards and downwards too, and let our head glide at the top of our spine in an easy gliding way. And then we can observe what changes. We can ask ourselves the question, what changes in me? And finally, we could ask ourselves, where am I resting right now? Where do I notice that I'm resting? Maybe body parts. Maybe it feels like my system is resting. Just observing where might be resting right now. And notice what changes with that question and that observation. Any comments or thoughts that you want to share about that?
Yeah, at first, when you invited us to rest, I just felt like I just wanted to flop over. It was bizarre. Like I felt like that was my sort of thought. Yeah, and then all the rest I enjoyed just allowing my head to sort of move over the neck and in that last sort of direction or prompt that you were giving us, just noticing where I'm resting and where there might be tension, I feel like I'm resting with my upper body, like my hands, my arms and my hands are resting on my leg, but I'm noticing a lot of tension in my neck. And that actually brought up a little bit of emotion for me. Like there's just this feeling of like tightness and work and, like a desire to relax type of thing. So, yeah,
So,
that was just an interesting awareness. I hadn't noticed that there was so much tightness right here.
and it's nice to be able to connect with that, to know that that's going on, that, we might not even notice. We just go about our day with these habitual tightnesses or tightness in response to something, and reconnecting with that, noticing it, gives us the possibility of letting it go. If we don't know that it's there, there's not much that we can do about it. And just adding something new on doesn't change the fact that it's there.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's something that I talk a lot about in my work regarding sensory modulating strategies and sensory regulation. I do say that a lot of what is a prerequisite is developing awareness of what's going on in one's body because you can't implement a regulational strategy if you don't have the awareness first. And this sort of
Makes sense.
thing in so many sort of systems, whether it's a purely a cognitive approach or of whatever we're talking about, it always seems that awareness is the first piece. And so yeah, it's like how can we take care of ourselves? How can I how can I help to reduce this tension? How can I, maybe apply a technique for myself or get a massage or do anything to address this if I didn't even realize and I didn't really notice this until now. So thank you so much for helping me to notice what's going on in my body.
That's a great discovery. And so I would often say, well, that was a successful experiment. We discovered something, and so we might add, some thoughts about allowing our jaw to soften as well. If we carried on inviting the jaw to soften and the inside of the mouth, the
Mm-hmm.
tongue, and that can really contribute to some letting go of those things.
Yeah, I cannot remember the last time I tried to make the inside of my jaw soften. So I think that those are really cool practices. Just really, it just even the intention. Like I don't know if I could make my jaw soften, the inside of my jaw soften, but I think that even just the intention of trying to connect to these parts of us that we never that we don't really connect to, I think is
Yeah.
just such a helpful practice.
Yeah, and with intention, with practice, we can develop the skill of using the intention to allow it to happen. in our body
Mm-hmm.
without forcing it, without trying to make something happen, without trying to correct ourselves. So in the case of, for example, shoulders, we all hold our tension in our own unique place, but for many people, it's our neck and shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And many
Mm-hmm.
people find themselves pulling their shoulders back, but because they've been told to sit up straight, or they feel like they're doing something wrong there, or that's just mainstream way of thinking. And letting go of that allows a softening and mobility. So yeah, like you said, it's bringing awareness to these things that are happening.
Thank you so much for guiding us through that. I know that you have your master's in like pain science or something that like
That's
that,
right.
right?
Yeah, masters in science and medicine and pain management. It's a
Okay.
mouthful.
That's a mouthful. Yes, something masters and pain. You are a pain specialist and you work with a lot of clients with chronic pain. You work with them in multiple ways, but I know that one way that you work with them is through Alexander technique, and through that practice that we just did, it became very aware to me how these unconscious holding patterns can contribute to ongoing chronic pain because people are not aware of, the tension in their body or the way that they're actually doing things. Um, yeah, I could see that clearly of Alexander technique supporting them in just in discovering what's going on and ultimately, hopefully, helping them discover what would help them with some relief.
Yeah. And so one of the ways that's been demonstrated the Alexander technique helps is what you've been talking about, which is agency and self-efficacy. That possibility of choosing how I want to proceed, often in the face of challenging circumstances. That belief in our ability to do something is so important. And that's really influential when it comes to pain. So that's a big part of it. And then also this developing this body awareness improves what's called our body schema, those mental maps that we have of our body that could get blurry in order to protect ourselves and kind of clamp everything down, glomp it into one big unit that's not differentiated. And so we can begin to differentiate those parts and allow them to move with more independence by clarifying those mental maps. And I think that's a big part of what's going on too, as well as generally reducing reactivity, enabling us to pause before responding, to not jump to react or jump to an assumption. For example, in the case of pain, there's a lot of sensations that are related to pain that could be stiffness, it could be bloating, it could be heat, it could be stretch. There are a lot of different sensations that could be related in a person's pain presentation. And so it gives us the opportunity to pause and say, okay, what is this that I'm feeling? What name would I put to it? It's not just pain. No, I can distinguish this from that. And that helps us to be more resilient, to get more precise in our recognition of our own, the things that are happening in us.
Hmm. I
This,
mean, pain isn't pain so much about our own perception anyway. It's not like pain just exists independently of our perception, but if we can maybe become more neutral or more specific in what we're describing, that helps us to reduce our dysregulation or our distress about it. And so it can actually improve the pain symptoms because we're able to, like the name it to tame it sort of phenomenon, if we're
yeah,
able to
that's a
describe
great
it
way to
and
put it.
have it instead of just being like, oh my gosh, like alert, alert. But if we're able to like give it a name, then that can actually help us realize that it might, as you're saying, like it might not be pain. It actually might just be like a stretch or it might be stiffness. Is it? I mean, because it's basically I'm just looking for clarification. Like this is pain is a brain phenomenon, correct? It's a largely a perceptual issue.
It's perceptual, it's created by the nervous system as a whole, but the brain has a very big role in that. Yeah, and our perceptions are very much influenced by our past experience and our expectations. I'm not sure how much to go into perception, as that's a real very deep topic that we could talk for hours about. No?
We don't have to.
Well, I did want to mention that chronic stress is also a really big part of can be very influential in chronic pain as well. And pain itself, as you mentioned, can be very distressing, so that pain itself becomes a stressor. So that can create this
Mm-hmm.
vicious cycle too.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's chronic stress, there are chemicals floating around in our body that can sensitize our body parts, and we're getting more information. So we're getting more nociceptive input, which means
Mm-hmm.
essentially we're getting these danger signals. More
Mm-hmm.
danger signals, the more likely our brain is to interpret that we are at threat and that we need some kind of protection. And so our nervous system will respond by motivating us to protect ourselves. And one way of doing that is with pain.
Mm-hmm.
With stress, also, I think one interesting relationship to Alexander technique is that when we have habitual stress reactions, not only are we having habitual tensing of muscles, and so we're getting input, we may be getting input from that as well. Also, stress tends to motivate us to do habit-based behavior geared toward escaping from the pain,
Mm-hmm.
or that's just rigid things that we've always done it that way, we're used to doing it that way, and it closes us to other options. We're less likely to seek other things that we might value as well as protection.
Right.
And so that limits our possibilities of discovering that we may be okay to move, that we may be safe to move. And so our system doesn't have a chance to update, and it stays in that protection mode. So by exploring, by becoming more aware of our body and exploring possibilities of movement, we can begin to discover safety in our body.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really key, is finding that safety in your body.
Yeah, that's such an important point that you're bringing up because I hadn't, kind of put that together that when we're experiencing the stress from chronic pain or we are perceiving stress, that hinders our ability to access our higher level cognitive resources. And so we tend to act in our sort of our learned habitual patterns. And that if we can find ways to regulate our nervous system and open those possibilities, it sort of sounds like an upward spiral instead of a
An
downward
upward
spiral, it's an
spiral instead of a downward one. Yeah.
spiral. I wanted to ask about the body schema, which I think is fascinating. Um, and it's also related to experiencing stress. So if we are experiencing our body in our brain as one unit, we're not differentiating our digits, our limbs, and so forth as much. And so our body schema is unclear and blurry. And so then our brain's like, alert, alert, like something's off or just something doesn't feel right. We're not clear. This isn't safe. How much would self-touch and movement be involved in clarifying someone's body schema? Or if someone doesn't have access to self-touch or movement, like what would be the best way to clarify their body schema?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Self-touch is an interesting idea too. I like to use, for example, just a hand going out to invite some openness here. And also, it could be just a hand on the side of my head to invite a little bit of wiggle. Can I
Mm-hmm.
wiggle my head? Or even with the leg, can I wiggle my leg? Is it wiggleable? No, or is it stuck there?
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of things can be helpful. For example, movement in general is helpful for that. And we can explore movement by while we pay attention to different aspects of it too. And by paying attention to different aspects of movement rather than just going from A to B, we're giving ourselves more opportunity to discover that we might actually be okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And do you have like a favorite way to to clarify the body schema?
I wouldn't say that I have a favorite way because it's would be so unique to each individual. A common presentation that people come to Alexander Technique for is back pain. So with back pain, often people lose the ability to perceive their back.
Mm,
It's almost as if it's not there, or it's just this whole thing back there that hurts. And
yeah.
it's difficult to distinguish the parts for many
Mhm,
people.
mhm.
And then things clamp down and there's reduced mobility.
Right. They get
So it's,
scared.
yeah, and there's fear associated with that. There's a lot of beliefs often associated with that too, the belief that it's fragile when backs are actually usually quite strong
Hmm.
and the spine is quite strong. Addressing those beliefs is important too, but for example, encouraging people to explore ranges of movement from a curve to an arch to rotate and to pay attention to different aspects of that experience. For example, what am I doing with my shoulders as I rotate? Am I pulling my shoulders together? Or
Hmm.
am I letting my back be open?
Hmm.
And which one helps me to move more easily? Which one feels more
Hmm.
comfortable? Which one feels more familiar? The tight one
Hmm.
may feel more familiar.
Hmm.
So these kind of movements can be useful too. And I think the key thing is getting people curious, being curious about what's going on.
Yeah. Well, it sounds really helpful, the guidance that you could provide, because maybe, some people might not know all the ways that the spine can move. They're like, oh,
Right.
there's lateral flexion, or there's this, all the different ways that the spine can move. And might need to, you as the skilled practitioner might point that out to them, because they might not, some
Be
people might know, or
aware
like
of
if
those
it's
possibilities. Yeah.
whatever type of part that they are dealing with, they might not know all the different ways that it can move. And then you might offer that, and then they can be like, oh yeah,
Yeah. And then people may begin to make their own discoveries as their
exactly, yeah.
curiosity is piqued on. I think that can be something that we can use at any time. For example, if someone's bored, for example, too, and say there's nothing to do and you're sitting around and maybe that's related to some binge eating habits as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
If I can become curious about something about myself, that may become much more interesting to my brain than the habit or the fear or whatever those other things are that are getting me stuck.
mm-hmm. Right.
So I might explore some movement of rolling back and forth and paying attention to what's going on in my back, what's going on in my shoulders,
Mm-hmm,
what's going on
mm-hmm,
in my neck, what's going on in my jaw. How is this all related?
mm-hmm. That's
Curious,
a great question.
non-judgmental way.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I love that. How is this all related? How is this all related? And yeah, the non-judgment, the curiosity. Very, very powerful. It sounds like all of this is a very powerful practice. And I mean, this sounds like this is more than Alexander technique. This is a somatic exploration. This is mindfulness. This is, yeah, a way to approach life.
It's a way to approach life. And yes, it can be very powerful and very transformative.
Wonderful. Mari, well, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wisdom, sharing
Yeah.
about what you do, sharing about Alexander Technique, for guiding us through a brief Alexander Technique practice. I want to thank you so much. If people want to find out more about you or work with you, where would we direct them?
So my website is www.discoverease, all one word, ease is spelled EASE, .how, HOW. And I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook at, I think it's Alexander Technique, Mari Hodges.
Ah,
Mari
okay.
Hodges, Alexander Technique. It's one of those. Should have looked
Awesome.
that up first. And I'm on Instagram as Mari_Hodges.
Great. Great. Well, I will include those in the episode description. Thank you again so much, Mari. I appreciate you
Thanks
being
so
here.
much. I enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. Thank you.